Joy's Way by Dr. Brugh Joy. Chapter 4. Dream Analysis, Telepathy, the Tarot, and the Ching. What meaning does a teacher, any kind of teacher, impart to me concerning my perspective and my exploration? As one goes deeper into the transformational process, that question is to be kept in the forefront of one's awareness, because the discovery of the mechanisms of one's own mind begins during this phase of observing the relationship of external events to the changing internal perspectives. Teachers are only scaffoldings on which experiences display themselves. It is the experience of life, not the scaffolding of life, that we wish to examine in detail. For this purpose, a working knowledge of dream analysis, the tarot, and the Ching is invaluable in accelerating the expansion of awareness. These teaching forms are scaffoldings, or instruments, vehicles, or tools, if you prefer, that offer the opportunity to integrate into the experience of the self that which at first seems to be other than or external to the self. Telepathy is an experience common to all these teachers when they are perceived as deeper mechanisms of communication between the aspects of the individual consciousness. Especially in this context, it's important to realize that the word external is relative. Although many experiences in conscious awareness are usually considered external to the self, all experiences actually originate within the individual's consciousness. It's not hard to see the truth of this statement in the case of dreams. The filtered interpretation of the tarot cards, or the filtered interpretation of what a human teacher teaches. But it also includes any impression of the external world on the cortex of the brain. Most people, most of the time, consider these experiences to be not their own, but somehow originate outside themselves, to be external. Actually, the initial areas on which some teachers focus are the psychological mechanisms that block the full flow of external stimuli, whether of light, sound, or other electromagnetic waves, or even wave forms, not yet discovered or defined. Teachers try to help make the external internal. Many volumes, both profound and superficial, have been written on dreams and their interpretations, as well as on the tarot and the study of psychological defense mechanisms. It is not my intention to give an in-depth discussion of these areas, but rather to consider and concentrate on what I have found most useful in the understanding of the two states of ordinary human awareness, the conscious and the unconscious. I have often asked myself, how did human beings get into such a farcical state of being as to have the vaster portion of their consciousness relegated to the unaware, seemingly unfathomless pit? How is it that, so to speak, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing? To extend this analogy, does the left hand, the unconscious, know anything, including what the right hand is doing, while the right hand, the conscious, only knows what it itself is doing, and that only sometimes? Have we become identified with only a small segment of our potential awareness, forgetting or deliberately excluding the remainder? It is evident that we have. And when I get to the chapter on body energy fields, it will be even more evident that we have excluded the vaster, more significant areas, not only of our awareness, but also our physical beingness as well. The veil between the aware and the unaware states of consciousness is one focus of my current study. We don't need to develop higher states of consciousness because they already exist within us. What we need is to break down the artificial partitions that keep us from experiencing total awareness. When we start to understand how the mind operates at the ordinary levels, we have at least the beginning approach to rending this veil. At that point, the ushering in of a unified state of consciousness has begun. Then, the challenge is to accelerate the process. According to the generous statistics of psychologists, we are about 20% aware and 80% unaware of our actions and motivations. I would suggest more realistically that we are less than 0.0001% awake and more than 99.99999% unconscious. The psychologists arrived at less embarrassing figures because they did not acknowledge the multidimensional aspects of human awareness beyond the everyday outer mind. The appalling extent of our usual unconscious can be appreciated excruciatingly only when one has experienced expanded, mystical, or cosmic, or in my term, the natural unpartitioned states of awareness. One does not know how limited the ordinary awareness is until it is contrasted against a more expanded one. I really enjoy encountering die-hard rationalists who dismiss expanded experiences not just as fantasy, but even more extremely as non-existent. And I meet such people often. Not only do they want proof, of which there is plenty, but they demand proof that fits the structure of their beliefs about the physical world. To them, the simple truth is that since they haven't experienced expanded consciousness, it doesn't, and perhaps cannot, exist. When these skeptics begin to come into expanded awareness, I cannot help but laugh. They are overwhelmed, slightly disoriented, and sometimes enraged that they could have been so ignorant in such a recent past. No words are needed. The experience suffices. From the expanded state, the so-called real world appears to be a crazy patchwork quilt, a shambles of disorganized reality, and of course only partial reality at that. From expanded awareness, the return to ordinary perception is like returning to a very retarded human state of mind. The emphasis in my work is to bring expanded states of awareness to the experiential level of individuals, first by sharing a conceptual framework, then by demonstrating the mechanisms of consciousness that block the experiences, and finally through the example of my own beingness. This sharing, this demonstration, and this example consistently bring about direct experience, for which no words, profound or simple, can even be an adequate substitute. As I have recognized only in the last year, the mere presence of a being who enjoys periods of natural awareness can be very important in this process. In fact, I am now certain that absolutely no dialogue or action is necessary for individuals to be heightened into expanded awareness when they are in the presence of such a teacher. In a way unconscious to the seeker's awareness, the seeker's energy is freed from the old patterns and reshapes itself on the energy field of the teacher. Then the non-ordinary simply begins to be experienced. The words, the teaching lessons, the exercises are only scaffoldings that hold the individual attention long enough for this process of induction to occur. The teacher, as long as he or she is operating in expanded awareness, could talk about anything at all and still achieve the same results. The teacher's voice vibration can augment the experience. But to repeat, it's not the words or their content that cause the change. It is the sound, which could as well be made in gibberish or in chanting. Words and their content may expand the abstract intellectual portion of consciousness, but the ideas alone do not and cannot cause induction. The control and the mastery of the sound waves is part of the path of a teacher. If you have read Frank Herbert's Dune novels, you may already have some idea of voice vibration and its power. In the movement, from the divided to the unified state of awareness, the concept of the central room might be helpful. In March 1975, I was in meditation in Auroville, Auroville, an international interracial spiritual commune under the aegis of the now deceased Sri Aurobindo, Aurobindo, that was located on the southeastern coast of India, near the old French town of Pondicherry. During meditation, I was struck by an image of a large central room on the second floor of a 3-storied, many-roomed mansion, and I saw myself seated in the central room that was brilliantly lighted from the source above my head. From this central position, I didn't have to get up to enter one room and then another, or go upstairs or downstairs to observe what was happening in the structure, because the building was made of transparent crystal. The image reverberated through me and became an insight. There is such observational state of consciousness inside my own awareness. Conceiving the possibility enabled me to begin the experience. The next step was to break down the logical linear perspective, and thus to conceive that natural awareness does not have to concentrate on only one thing at a time. In the central room, more and more events can be experienced simultaneously. Although I have not yet mastered it completely, the phenomenon of multiple perspectives is developing rapidly in my awareness. This anecdote contains the significant initial insights that can begin to unify a divided or partitioned consciousness. It serves as a model for observing not only the subconscious activity, the ground level of the envisioned mansion, but the superconscious aspects as well, the 3rd-story level. The 2nd level has many other chambers in addition to the central room, exactly as in sequestered ordinary awareness. The ability to see clearly is only the beginning. Eventually, the crystal partitions are transmuted and unification is complete. Linear outer communication reflects the partitions of the outer mind. If I ask people to relate their problem to me, they begin to verbalize one idea and then another in linear outer communication until they feel that the problem has been described. While they are so doing, I close my eyes and attempt to image the impression of the total situation, using their words to guide me to the level and area of their consciousness where the conflict has configured itself. This technique uses a form of telepathic rapport. It was a long time before I encountered a client who used telepathy consciously, who understood that the totality of any given problem or awareness could be instantaneously transmitted. And then I met Carolyn Conger. I knew before I met her that she was a clairvoyant, but I did not suspect the degree of development in all the psi areas. Naively, I began our session together by asking her to tell me her problems. I closed my eyes, awaiting the words that would carry me to the area of her consciousness where the problem was. After waiting a full 5 minutes for her to begin talking, I suspected that the problem must be so emotionally charged that she could not express herself. Finally, I told her to start just anywhere, and the words would come, and she burst out laughing, and only then began to tell the reasons for coming to see me. A year later, when I knew her better, she told me what had occurred during the first 5 minutes of the consultation, and by then I too found it quite humorous. She had already picked up that I was capable of telepathic rapport, and so she began the session by flashing the totality of her problem to me telepathically. I, however, had put myself into a set to receive feeling tones, not images. I had no idea what was going on. The tables had been turned and I didn't even know it. So that she would not embarrass me, Carolyn had finally resorted to words when I, with great compassion, had urged her to begin. In July 1977, Carolyn and I started working together on direct image telepathy, an experience far more exciting than feeling tone telepathy. We began by setting aside time in the morning while we were eating breakfast, and I would start by drawing something on a piece of paper, a stick figure geometric design, a bird, whatever. And then I would create a feeling to associate with it. And when I had both aspects well in mind, I will signal that I was ready, and Carolyn would tell me what her impression was. This procedure was particularly easy for her, and she missed little, even when I mixed a negative feeling state with a positive or happy drawing. The addition of a feeling state, however, helps to intensify what is telepathically impressed, and so it's very helpful for the beginner at receiving. When it was her turn to impress my awareness with her drawing and her feeling tone, I would concentrate on picking up the feeling. At first, greater intensity of her feeling, anger, frustration, or whatever, made it easier for me to tell what the feeling was. Later, I could receive less intense feelings telepathically. After I had an impress of the feeling, I would wait until an image appeared in my mind. Sometimes it was very clear, but most of the time it was indistinct. Occasionally I would see no image, but the word for the image would pop into my mind. At other times I would be talking about the feeling tone that I was sensing, and when I would suddenly shift and say what object she was using. As Carolyn says, it's just like thinking. An idea emerges into your awareness. How an idea appears in consciousness is unknown, and neither in the way a telepathic impress appears. The more you can relax and allow the phenomenon, the more accurate the results. What Carolyn stresses is that one doesn't have to send or receive anything. In the state of awareness where telepathic impressions are experienced, the sender and the receiver are one and the same person. It is another example of the hologram principle. I can easily impress to Carolyn whether she is in the same room or miles away. But so far, I am only sporadically able to sense her images. This work is inspiring to me because it foreshadows what human beings in general will be experiencing within the next 100 years. Words are unsatisfactory when direct image and feeling tone telepathies have been experienced. Once again, it is a cultivation that selects and conditions only a few of the many possible aspects of awareness. In our Western material technological culture, the primary emphasis is on the intellectual, the idea abstractions, to the almost total exclusion of simultaneous or multidimensional states of consciousness. Sexuality and emotive responses are similarly conditioned into limited patterns. Sequential linear awareness is an important and useful tool in its place, but certainly is not the culmination of awareness, and it will eventually be revalued instead of being dominant as it is today. It will become the instrument of a higher organizer or orchestrator of consciousness. This higher orchestrator will represent the central room in the crystal mansion, the unified state of beingness. Why do I discuss Carolyn Conjure and telepathy in a section on dreams? Because dreams are direct image communications. One portion of our consciousness impresses itself telepathically on another part. We will discover as we go on that telepathy is not just one means of communication, but is probably the basic mechanism of all thought. In the West, the works of Sigmund Freud and of Carl Jung made the initial breakthroughs into the subconscious. The East has been hundreds, if not thousands of years ahead of the West in the awareness of subconscious and superconscious states, but has been vastly limited in practice by restrictions on the kinds and the numbers of people who were allowed to learn this information. The Western mystery schools and various occult schools from pre-Egyptian times onward transmitted forth the teaching of the higher consciousness, but again conveyed them to only a few. Only in the past 100 years have the deeper esoteric wisdoms been brought forth to the public in the West. The amplification of this trend over the past 10 years is astounding. The ancients enjoined us against revealing the secret teachings to the masses for fear of misuse of the powers they engender. In my experience, this fear is ungrounded, because even when you reveal ancient techniques or knowledge gleaned over many lifetimes, few can understand them, and even fewer can make use of them. By the time a soul reaches the state of consciousness in which to use and develop such states, such gifts, he or she is aware of the action-reaction law, the law of karma. No one escapes the consequences of misuse of power, whether it be temporal, material power, or powers not yet conceived by the general public. For millennia, Eastern teachers have propagated the idea that the psychic levels concerned with manipulation of the physical plane are to be shunned, excluded from experience, because they represent less than the supreme state that can be reached, and the danger of being caught in power and glamour is too great. I find this kind of teaching ironic, because every soul has to work through personal power in his or her development on the way to that supreme state. If our task is to become totally aware, which I believe is the evolutionary sequence of each soul, the idea of excluding the higher natural states of awareness is inconceivable. There is validity in the concern that a person's development will be retarded if the soul becomes trapped in the psychic awareness. But instead of avoiding any stage of the journey, the way onward is to experience any and all states without clutching them, to allow the adventure in awareness to unfold without grasping or trying to retain any part of it. On the other hand, one must not will the manifestation of psychic states prematurely. These energies can heal or destroy, send one to the heights or plunge one into the depths. As souls who are power-driven know well, I spent the greater part of the first 35 years of this lifetime working through personal power, and I still have not finished resolving its subtler areas. Up through the years when I was in medical school, the autonomic nervous system, which controls the body's involuntary functions, such as the tonus of the vascular system, the heart rate, the smooth muscles activity in the respiratory, digestive, and excretory systems, and so on, was thought to be strictly outside the control of the conscious mind. In Western science, biofeedback was the first major breakthrough to demonstrate the fallacy of this belief. In the East, the conscious control of the autonomic nervous system, achieved without instruments, has been a feat well known to yogis and high lamas for centuries. Volitional control over brain wave patterns, and by implication volitional control over altered states of consciousness, is an additional technique developed by Western technology, and again is a replication of much earlier explorations of the Eastern mystics and occultists. Excellent books on biofeedback, notably those by Barbara Brown, are also available. But biofeedback is only one approach that is currently opening the veil between the unaware and aware portions of the consciousness. Dream analysis is the royal road, in quotes, royal road, into a portion of the unconscious psyche, but it is severely limited by the skill of the interpreter and by the ability of the client to remember the dream. Eunice Hurt, my second teacher, placed great emphasis on dream interpretation. Fortunately for her work, her psi abilities enabled her to recall the details of a dream told to her, even when the dreamer did not remember them. She could literally dream the dream of the dreamer, but she did not have to go to sleep to do it. In this section, I wish to relate some of the techniques she shared, along with those I have developed in the 6 years since her death. Certain basic concepts underlie my current hypothesis regarding dream work. These ground rules have proved invaluable in gaining insight into both myself and others, it will become apparent that I am not a traditional dream analyst, psychiatric or otherwise, nor have I been formally trained in the art. It simply comes naturally to me. 1. First and foremost, dreams are as valid conscious realities as the reality experienced in the outer awake state. I am using the word awake in its generally accepted sense because, as I've already implied, I consider the outer awake state quite sleepy or retarded, if not asleep or comatose. The fact that a dream may make no rational sense to the outer mind does not justify disregarding it. Like a foreign language, its organization and form of communication must be learned. A person speaking Tibetan could be showering forth the pearls of the ages, but the message would be totally lost to the listener untrained in the language. So it is with dreams and their messages. 2. Unlike the outer mind, the conscious and the superconscious areas are not limited in their range of experience and forms of communication, nor are these areas identified with a particular body, belief system, or the construct called time. They do not have to distinguish between self and other than self, and physical laws are of no concern to them. Number 3. Dream realities are far closer to our natural states of beingness than even the most highly intensified outer reality. To my mind, dreams demonstrate conclusively that the general human consciousness is not composed of unique, isolated, self-initiated units that can learn only through outer teachers. Indeed, the individual consciousness is part of a vast collective pool of total human awareness, the collective unconscious. When the outer mind is blocked by social conditioning, the dream reality can tap the collective unconscious and communicate it to the outer mind. Later, when the outer awareness is able to tap the same collective pool volitionally, the state of initial illumination is reached and the dream function diminishes because it's no longer needed as much as before. Number 4. Clearly, the dream state is not the unconscious, but is an intermediate state between the aware and the unaware, a mechanism that has some of the qualities of both states. True dreaming states are under the primary direction of the unconscious, while the waking dream states, such as fantasy, are primarily influenced by the outer mind. 5. In true dreaming states, the consciousness of the individual witnessing the dream cannot know that it is dreaming. All that is experienced is absolutely, in the relative sense, real to the experiencing awareness. This is a key point to emphasize because it enables the comprehension that our total beingness is multidimensional, participating simultaneously in many reality systems. Only the focus of awareness determines which reality dimension or state of consciousness is perceived as real. Only the focus of our awareness determines which reality dimension or state of consciousness is perceived as real. Number 6. Ramana Maharshi, an East Indian saint, made a salient point. The observer who witnesses the outer reality state is the same observer who witnesses the dream reality states. There is no true distinction between the two or more states of beingness. There is no true distinction between the two or more states of beingness. Keep in mind that while you are in the inner dream state, nothing is going on to convince you that the reality experienced there is not valid. Just as when you are in normal, awake, nothing is going to convince you that it too isn't the real reality. The task is how to know yourself as the observer of both states. Number 7. The outer awake state is as much a dream as the inner dream state is a reality. All the techniques used to interpret dream states can be employed to interpret the outer dream. At this level of awareness, the unconscious activity common to both the inner and the outer dream states can be clearly seen because the same dynamics occur in both. Jungian analysts who are relatively developed in inner dream interpretation fail to take this crucial step in working with clients, and it is a severe limitation in their work, as it is in any other psychoanalytic process that employs dream analysis. It is such a simple step to take. All one has to do is ask the client to describe the preceding day's activities and analyze this report as if it were a dream. Contained within the narration of the outer dream will be all clues one usually uncovers when analyzing inner dreams. Just as in the inner dream state, the unconscious patterns operate the awake state and influence all action and perception of that action. As in the inner dream, the individual is unconscious of the patterns displayed. The success of this approach has been demonstrated both in my individual consultations and in group conference work. Number 8. If we conclude that all realities are varieties of dream states, an insight thousands of years old, and that there are dreams within dreams within dreams, the next concept can be considered. In the analyst-client interaction, there are at least 5 different dreams that come from the beginning in the dreamer's consciousness. And what follows is a list of the 5. 1. The original dream of the dreamer. 2. The dream as related by the dreamer. 3. The dream that appears in the mind of the analyst as the dreamer relates the dream. 4. The dream that appears in the mind of the dreamer as the analyst interprets the related dream. 5. The dream that appears in the mind of the analyst as the dreamer interprets his or her dream. Eunice Hurt was the only person I ever met who could directly experience the dream of the dreamer. The usual analyst is dealing almost exclusively with secondary or tertiary dream states, primarily the latter. These dream states may not be anything like the original dream, but they can give enough insight into the dreamer's consciousness to be of value. In the initial phases of dream work, the analyst is, in fact, interpreting his or her own dream, the third, and not that of the dreamer. As the analyst becomes more self-aware, there is less and less of this distortion. The best dream work allows both client and analyst to see each other's dynamics through the mutual interpretation of the 4 dreams after the original one. The retelling of the dream always changes it. The changes that are made are significant because they reveal further unconscious dynamics. I know of 2 people who can interpret another person's dream as retold without distorting the information that they hear from the dreamer. A great deal of information can be gleaned about the psychodynamics of analysts from the ways they interpret dreams and from the selection of parts that they stress. The same is true, of course, of the dreamer who is interpreting the original dream. The dreamer must always be the first to analyze or to try to analyze the original dream. If the analyst interprets the dream before the dreamer struggles through his or her own interpretation, no matter how inept it may be, the dreamer remains ignorant of the actual practice of dream analysis and remains tied to the analyst. In addition, the analyst loses the opportunity to observe the dreamer's defenses as they distort or cause forgetting in the dreamer's interpretation. These dynamics are well known to the dream analyst, but rarely known to the dreamer. When the client cannot participate fully, the analyst also loses the opportunity to develop his or her own self-awareness. Most therapists in any field of psychology or psychiatry do not like to expose their own unconscious dynamics. I strongly disagree with this attitude. Mutual exploration is a far better teaching interaction than the usual student-teacher interaction or the client-professional interaction. Holistic medicine has the magnificent attribute of breaking down the professional barriers so that the physician and the patient explore the problems as cohorts instead of perpetrating the old false dichotomy between the all-knowing, the professional or the teacher, and the ignorant, the client or the student. In the best of holistic exchanges, mystiques and myths are shattered. Each of the interacting human beings is sharing openly and honestly. For the client, the important goal of dream interpretation is not the understanding of this or that dream, but the power to achieve self-insight, the ability to carry out dream interpretation independently in the future. For this reason, I have sometimes had people work on the interpretation of individual dreams for days, weeks, or even months, while I withheld my own insights. If I withhold or do not deliver my insights to them, they are sometimes appalled, sometimes angered, sometimes frightened, and most certainly frustrated. But when they experience insight into a dream on their own, no words, no amount of money, no external gift could possibly be equivalent to the reward of self-realization they experience. No healer helps his or her clients by doing for them what they can do for themselves. Number 9. As skill in dream interpretation increases, group sharing of dreams can be an amazing accelerator of individual self-realization. One person's primary dream may generate many number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5 dreams in other people in the group. So that was part of the list he gave before, right? As they observe the unconscious dynamics of their fellow participants, more readily grasp their own unconscious dynamics. Out of a group of 20 people, 19 may be blocked from seeing the unconscious pattern at work in a particular dream. The clear perception of the 20th person may be enough to release them all. Number 10. Because dreams are mosaics, the first important step in the interpretation of a dream is to record every detail accurately, no matter how insignificant or absurd it may seem. Dream journals are invaluable. A notebook or tape recorder by the bedside can prove very helpful, because it's often difficult to keep the focus of awareness in the dream reality long enough to record it. At first, many of my dreams were lost because I was absolutely sure I would remember the dream next morning, only to have it evaporate upon rising. There is also a meditative technique for recapturing dreams that I'll discuss when I cover state-bound consciousness. Number 11. At least in the initial phases of dream work, the specific details of a dream are important only insofar as they guide the analysis to the general pattern or patterns displayed. As is well known, to traditional dream analysis, each component of a dream is symbolic of an aspect of the dreamer's consciousness, whether it involves people, places, events, moods, actions, or things. Nothing in a dream is superfluous, but initially, little, if any, of it is to be taken literally. Insights lie in discovering the essence of the symbols. Number 12. There is never an absolute interpretation of any dream symbol. Both inner dreams and outer dreams are multidimensional, with many levels of meaning all simultaneously interacting. An object in one dream may appear in another dream and have an entirely different symbolic essence. This aspect of dream interpretation, so very difficult to teach, represents the mastery of the dream analysis as distinguished from a cookbook approach to dream symbols. A body of water in one dream may mean the unconscious, the spiritual, the feminine, fluidity, urine, the emotions, movement from one place to another, a need fulfilled, or a multiplicity of other things. The pattern and relationship of objects and events helps guide one into a relatively functional interpretation. The best dream analysts are intuitive, and so are the best dream analyses. Number 13. The way a dream is lighted appears to be significant. In my experience, dreams that are brilliantly colored and super vivid reflect the superconscious state and are always deeply meaningful to the dreamer. If such a dream comes through, don't lose it. In my own life, these dreams are invariably prophetic, except in those persons who invariably dream in color. Dreams of unusual color intensity are from the mental or higher creative areas of consciousness. Dreams in subdued lighting, shadowy with a dark greenish or brownish tone, or in black and white, are from the emotional astral levels. Dreams of even darker quality are from deep subconscious areas. Number 14. I find it extremely valuable to interpret each aspect of my own dreams from 7 different perspectives. 1. Literal physical perspective. 2. Sexual perspective. 3. Emotional perspective. 4. Collective human perspective. 5. Higher creative perspective. 6. Mental intellectual perspective. And 7. Universal perspective, which synthesizes the other 6 perspectives. In general, a specific dream will appear to be, as a whole, centered in one of the 7 groups, while its component parts may reflect either the same level or others. The level of a dream as a whole gives a good indication of which unconscious area is unresolved in the dreamer. Number 15. An interesting phenomenon occurs in dream interpretation, what I call the zing, a feeling sensation in the awareness of both the analyst and the dreamer when the interpretation is precisely in tune with what the dream was communicating. Number 16. In analyzing dreams, it is essential to remember the 3 injunctions from the last chapter. Make no comparisons, make no judgments, delete the need to understand. Psychological sets and emotional reactions make it impossible to analyze dreams. Number 17. Another technique that I found helpful in working on my own dreams is to tell my dream to someone else and to have him or her relate it back to me as if it was his or her dream. Seeing it as another person's dream will often unblock my unconscious long enough for me to get the insight. There are two other dream aspects worth mentioning. The first is that there are rare people who can literally dream a dream for another person. This process is not the same as Eunice's apparent unique ability. She could recover your dream telepathically after you'd already dreamed it. These other unusual persons can take your place and dream a dream that you've never dreamed, but that is entirely yours. This art has been known since ancient times. In the healing temples of ancient Greece, a seeker or a seeker of prophetic advice would consult a priestess gifted in this art. The priestess would then enter a natural state of sleep and upon awakening would report to the seeker what she had experienced. Drugs and trance states were used in the same way. A woman psychiatrist in Los Angeles has told me several dreams that she had about me. In each case, she had the sensation that the dream did not belong to her. She also had other dreams involving me, but sensed these dreams as her own. When she reports one of my dreams to me, I immediately recognize the significance to me and can in no way interpret it as if it belonged to her. The second aspect of dream work that I'm beginning to explore is the potential of a dream experienced in common by several members of a group at the same time. Each member of the group is asked, his or her consciousness, to be open to experiencing a community dream. No other specific suggestion is made. After retiring, they are to implant this suggestion in their minds during twilight sleep, the hypnagogic state on the border between sleep and wakefulness. So far, individuals have reported dreams involving the group, but never have two or more people reported a similar dream from the same night. I do believe that group dream is possible. However, I think that the participants at this time are not yet sufficiently unified in group consciousness to experience the phenomenon. The initial 2-week conferences emphasize self-realization, not group realization. Further, more advanced conference work will, I think, confirm this intuitive idea of groups and people simultaneously dreaming the same dream. The exploration of the tarot is very similar to dream work, but it has one distinct advantage. It can create an instantaneous dream merely by shuffling the cards and laying out the deck in a predetermined pattern. The tarot operates primarily through the symbolic, non-rational aspects of consciousness, the same state from which dreams communicate. The quality and accuracy of the tarot interpretation depends solely upon the querent's own ability, because it's only a reflection of the focus or level of consciousness of the inquirer. The tarot is an excellent teacher because as the user advances in expanded awareness, it reflects this expansion. Therefore, the tarot responds uniquely to each individual and never teaches more than one person and never teaches more than the person is capable of receiving. One hears repeatedly about the tarot that if a person were confined to a prison cell for life without parole, with only a tarot deck, that person would gain the knowledge of the entirety of human experience, not only in the past, but in the future as well. No one knows the origin of the tarot cards. Teachers of metaphysics often refer to the ancient Egyptians and the Hermetic school as the originators, but the earliest decks thus far discovered are European and from around the 14th century. Our modern playing cards are derived from the early tarot decks, so at least 52 of the 78 cards will be familiar to those who wish to explore this technique. The tarot consists of 4 suits called the minor arcana, and with each suit and each suit has 14 cards, an ace through 10, a page, a knight, a queen, a king. The page through king are called court cards. The suits are divided into wands, equivalent to clubs, pentacles, diamonds, swords, spade, and cups, hearts. Thus, there is a total of 56 cards in the minor arcana. The major arcana of 21 cards bears the Roman numerals 1 through 21, representing life principles beyond the ordinary levels. The final card in the tarot deck, the Fool, is number 0. Stands alone in neither arcana and is probably the most enigmatic of all. Some manufacturers supply, in addition, 2 blank cards to protect the top and the bottom of the pack when not in use. Each of the 78 cards displays a distinctive individual picture. I have selected the Rider Tarot deck, conceived by Arthur Edward Waite for both conference work and my own personal exploration, for the essential reason that it offers the most literal representation of both outer and inner dream realities. There are many other decks, most of which have sprung up in recent years, but none of them touch the literal quality that I find so helpful in making the jump from the tarot cards to what I call the tarot of life. The Egyptian, Witches, Aquarian, and Mayan decks, although aesthetically beautiful, are designed with greater emphasis on geometric form or mystical symbols and are too abstract for my purposes. As originally designed, each tarot card presents a facet of the total life experience, from the mundane to the spiritual heights. Each card, like a dream, contains many symbols which may be more or less obvious, depending upon the perspective of the viewer. Both the colors used and the numbering are important because they are based on the ancient principles derived from numerology and mystical teachings about colors. Every detail is significant in the interpretation of the card or the cards, and in the process of interpretation, the outer mind sharpens its ability to see all the detail without losing the impression of the card as a whole. As a channel to the understanding of human consciousness in both its conscious and unconscious aspects, the tarot has few peers. Even the I Ching, as magnificent teacher as it is, cannot, in my opinion, make one aware of such psychological defenses as projection, nor tie in dream states to the degree that the tarot can. In other areas, they are on a par, that is, teaching both synchronicity with insight into the past, present, and future, and the ancient wisdoms. The tarot, like the I Ching, is based on the assumption that the cards or the coins in the yarrow sticks used to divine the I Ching hexagram are not separate from the consciousness of the inquirer. The querent's beingness and the cards are in relationship to each other beyond the outer mind's ideas of time and space. The cards and the querent influence each other. The querent's higher awareness knows the final layout already before the cards are shuffled. The higher dimensions of the querent's consciousness also know the answer to the question that the querent is asking, and the shuffling and the laying out of the cards is merely an act in linear time, a mechanism that establishes the channel to the higher levels of awareness. The same holds true for casting the coins or yarrow sticks and working with the I Ching. For readers who have difficulty accepting this concept, the parapsychological laboratories at Duke University and the University of California at Davis, and for that matter, parapsychological laboratories all over the world, have voluminous evidence that certain people can consistently foretell almost exactly the sequence of a series of the 25 specially designed cards used in parapsychological work. Fewer can tell the exact or nearly exact sequence of cards one or two shuffles ahead, and a very rare person can predict the exact sequence of 52 cards of a regular playing card deck in a future sequence, one or several shuffles ahead. Whether one is calling the sequence of a deck that has been shuffled but not yet seen, or whether one is predicting the sequence of several shuffles ahead, the same mechanism of consciousness is involved. It is the ability to see or to have the future impressed upon one's awareness. To put it in other terms, our ordinary awareness is always in the past in relationship to expanded awareness. The higher levels simply utilize time and space as the outer organizational levels on which to display that which is not involved with time and space. The rare, talented individuals mentioned above do not need the tarot or the I Ching as vehicles to expanded awareness. They have direct access, an attribute that greater number of humans will have developed in centuries to come. We must realize that just as the physical body is not as it appears to be, time and space are not what the outer mind conceives them to be. All is energy interaction in a timeless state, and the apparent material plane is only a manifestation of one focus of the psyche. So, however incredible the theory of the tarot may seem to the rational mind, the fact is that the rational mind is not a good judge of the question. Somehow, that which creates us moment by moment also creates the cards moment by moment, and in relationship to expanded awareness, we and the cards are both in the past, because all manifestations now are the results of processes and creations moments ago. Remember, in dream reality, every object, even though it appears to be separate and distinct from the observer, is a creation of some aspect of the dreamer's consciousness. The tarot is one of the best tools I know, both for rapid insight into personal motives, time and space relationships, and defenses that prevent the interpretation of the cards, and for reconditioning emotional responses, augmenting the intuitive faculty, restructuring personal belief systems, and beginning access to more universal levels of awareness. I have used the tarot at the close of personal consultations, asking it to reveal to my outer mind any dynamics overlooked in the session that might be important. To my amazement, it often turns up a critical dynamic that has been totally unseen till then. In the latter part of 1972, I was given my first tarot deck. It had belonged to an elderly spiritual teacher who had died. His widow gave me the deck, but suggested that I consult with it and ask its permission before using the cards. I was terribly excited because I knew that I understood the tarot at a deep level without having to train myself in its use. According to the mechanical techniques I really did know, I dutifully imbued the deck with my vibration, carefully shuffled the cards, held the question before my consciousness: do I have permission to use these cards? When I laid the cards out in the traditional Celtic pattern, the layout clearly told me not to use the cards. Undaunted, I reshuffled the pack, really imbuing the cards with my vibration, and again I did a layout. Excuse me. Slightly more emphatically, the cards appeared to answer, "Not now." My rational mind refused to accept the answer, and figuring that the odds were favorable for a positive response, on the next layout, I again shuffled the cards and laid out the cards. This time, some of the really negative cards began to show up, and the answer clearly was no. What is a beginner's querent into metaphysical realms to do. Oh, what is a beginner's querent into metaphysical realms to do but reshuffle the deck and try again? This time the answer came back, no, no, no. Altogether, I tried 7 times, and each layout was more deprecating than the last one. I finally capitulated and put the cards away and did not touch a tarot deck again until August 1976, when I was given another deck. My excitement was rekindled, but the memory of the previous encounter added a touch of anxiety. On the first layout, the response from the second deck was a strong affirmation, and my deeper exploration of the tarot began. I now realize that my work with all such tools and techniques, including palmistry, graphology, astrology, pendulum work, crystal ball, tea leaf reading, radionics, had to be deferred until I had completed the development of a direct channel into these states of awareness through a process of meditation, and the inner teacher, both topics to be covered in a later chapter. There is a very real danger of displacing the power of direct conscious awareness onto any of the objects or vehicles in which they can actually interfere with the opening of the direct channel. Initially, dreams, the tarot, and the I Ching are to make one more self-aware. As with any good teacher, they fall away as one enters more deeply into the states of direct knowledge. And that concludes Chapter 4. Chapter 5 will be called Lona, Brugh Joy, and Eunice Jean Hurt. Wow, that was certainly interesting. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe, and till soon.